I've never seen him in a suit, and I said, who are you? Then he spoke. You look good. You clean up well. So I'm sitting with 3 Marines at my table. I don't know about yours, but that violates the Geneva Convention. That was like my favorite shot of John, the thing in Hanoi, because it says U.S. Air Force. He hates that. He hates that. He wants to raise money to replace it. So, Jimmy, that was beautiful. Marco, awesome. Awesome. Thank you very, very much. John's favorite saying is never trust anybody under 50, but I'll give you an exception. I mean, y'all two guys represent the future of freedom. And you deserve, General Mattis, a long, eloquent introduction. You're not going to get one. You deserve it. I don't know why they picked me. I landed at 7:30. I just got back from Jerusalem. Had a glass of wine. This probably won't go well. But so my one comment about moving the embassy, I said, if you got a problem with Jerusalem being the capital of Israel, take it up with God. Some people laughed, some people didn't. So everybody's got a John McCain story. I've got one I can tell in public. What can I say? Codels. Have you ever been on a Codel with John? Yeah, the French Foreign Legion is like a vacation. So the rule is you can't have dinner and lunch in the same country. It's really crazy after a while. But my favorite trip of all, talking about freedom, is that we were going somewhere that nobody else would go for a reason, because everybody else is smarter than us. And so we were in one of these stands. I can't remember the name of it, and it's not associated with freedom. So he picked up the paper and said, 500 people got killed in this country yesterday. I said, okay. He says, we got to go. And I said, why? We got to stand up for freedom. I said, why don't you go? But we went. So we land, and we go to the embassy, which was a Soviet hotel with a big disco ball. And John said, hey, guys, how's it going? All the Marines are in full battle gear. They got the guns and, all the ammo, and they're taking Bush's picture down, and they're shredding everything. And he says, how's it going? So, John, I don't think it's going that well. There's a reason they didn't want us to come here. So we had this news conference with the dissidents, the ones that were not killed. And they were beaten and bloodied, and they had like one camera because this is a dictatorship, and it wasn't a friendly camera. John's railing on, this is terrible, these people freedom fighters, I stand with you, America stands with you, I've lost my freedom, I will die for freedom. Then it was my turn, and I said, well, I just want the government to know there's 2 sides to every story. I look forward to hearing their side later on, hoping we could get out of this place. But if there was ever a romantic view of America, John McCain possesses it. He's been in love with this country, the ideals of this country. He's a hopeless romantic when it comes to freedom, and he's taught me a lot about freedom. You really don't appreciate it till you lose it. And I think that's why he's so passionate. But freedom, somebody's got to fight for it. General Mattis, you've been fighting for it for a long damn time, and we appreciate it. So I was with John last week, and we laughed, we cried, we watched The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. You need to watch that movie. Nikki, do you know what it is? You're too young. You're doing a great job, by the way. The Palestinians said hello. You make us proud, you really do. But this movie tells you all you need to know about John McCain and all you need to know about me, because it is great plot lines. And we gave you an R-rated version, a lot of commentary. But General Mattis called to brief John about getting out of the Iran deal. And you did it so respectfully. You said, Mr. Chairman, I want to let you know the president decided to withdraw from the deal. I think it was a sound decision, but he wanted me to tell you, and I wanted you to know it before anybody else, because nobody respects you more than I do. I cannot tell you, whatever medicine he's on, nothing replaced that phone call. Thank you for calling John and keeping him relevant. As long as you can tweet, John McCain would be relevant. And so I enjoyed my time, but we're here for you tonight. I always wondered why I did not get this award. Now I know. Here's who's got it in the past: Ronald Reagan, 41 Bush, 43 Bush, Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, and the Pope. So now I know why I didn't get it. But now I know why you did. Isn't that a pretty good crowd? You fit right in there. You somewhere between Ronald Reagan and the Pope. But you're a Marine's Marine. You're a man's man. And you've got a heart of gold, and you have fought and sacrificed for this country. And it started when he enlisted in the Marines at 18. Then he got to be a second lieutenant, and 40 years later he retires. He was the commander of the 1st Battalion, 7th Marine Regiment. I don't know what that means, but it sounds impressive. I'm an Air Force guy. We're sort of a lethal NGO. We're not unionized, but we're pretty close. Commander of Task Force 58 during the initial operations in Afghanistan. The commander of the 1st Marine Division. I think that's where you were at, Jimmy. As long as there's one Marine with a rifle, we'll be safe. That's what every Marine tells me, and I believe it. Commander of U.S. Central Command CENTCOM from 2010 to 2013. You have been in battle. You understand war as well as anybody, and that's why you're a good man to have to make peace, because anybody who understands war wants peace. But the one thing I tell you about the general, don't play him. You'll regret it. The 26th Secretary of Defense confirmed 98-1. The Pope couldn't get 98 votes in this environment. There's two things I want to quote. Some people's voices matter and others don't. I can't think of a stronger voice than Senator John McCain and General Mattis at a time when voices really matter. Very few people you can quote that the Senate or the House really cares about. When General Mattis speaks as Secretary of Defense, people listen. And let me give you a quote. Let me be clear. As hard as the last 16 years of war has been on our military, no enemy in the field has done so much to harm the readiness of the U.S. military than the combined impact of the Budget Control Act sequestration and continuing resolutions. With that one statement, it allowed people like me and Senator McCain and Marco to set aside sequestration that had given us the smallest Navy since 1915, the smallest Army since 1940, and grounded half of the fighter planes in the Air Force. No enemy could do that. Only Congress could do that. And when you spoke the way you did, I took it as a poster, and Marco came down and everybody came down. You shamed us into setting aside sequestration. And Dan spoke. The Marines are alive and well in the Senate. The power of that voice to get politicians who can't agree on almost anything to set aside sequestration is why you deserve this award. That's hard power. I'm the Foreign Ops Chairman. I'm in charge of foreign aid, which is really popular back home. I am glad I got a ambassador of the United Nations that I can point to, say she will manage the money well. Nikki, you have made it really easy to support the State Department's budget. Thank you very, very much. Freedom has to be fought for. It's hard to get. It's even harder to keep. But for it to really survive, it's got to be beyond the force of arms. I think Marco described very eloquently the difference between a democracy and an autocratic. And I hope Trump wouldn't listen. Some of that stuff he'll like. You know, like no elections and all that kind of stuff. You know, I'm actually in 2020 cycle. I like some of it myself. You can pick your own opponent, but the temptations of that are fleeting. So you described very well the difference. But soft power keeps us safe as much as any bomb you can drop. The one thing that General Mattis, Secretary of Defense now, has taught me after 44 trips to Iraq and Afghanistan with John McCain almost every time is that in this war, you're not going to win by dropping bombs. You're not going to win by killing people. General Mattis and others have taught me that to win this war, you have to have a hopeful life to compete with a glorious death. That building a small schoolhouse in a remote region of Iraq, Afghanistan, or Syria will do more damage to radical Islam than any bomb you could drop. I learned that from the generals. I learned that from the general's general, General Mattis, IRI. To those who are in this business, you're as important to me as any brigade, squadron of airplanes, or fleet of ships. You're out there on the front lines in very difficult conditions, helping those who are willing to speak out. John McCain is the spirit of this organization. Freedom has to be fought for, and people have to die to maintain it. But to really share freedom, you share values. And this is what General Mattis said about the State Department. If you don't fund the State Department fully, then I need to buy more ammunition ultimately. So I think it's a cost-benefit ratio. The more we put into the State Department's diplomacy, hopefully the less we have to put in our military budget as we deal with the outcome of an apparent American withdrawal from the international scene. Those words I have worn out. There's an effort throughout the world to withdraw. The strong man march is on the march. Hard power you can sell to the American public because they know how vicious this enemy is, and they're willing to invest in the military to keep them safe. But what General Mattis has taught us and taught me, that safety really comes when people have the ability to speak out. They have a voice. And that soft power, according to this general, makes us just as safe, if not more safe, than hard power. The reason you get this award tonight, General Mattis, is because you understand freedom. You have fought for it, and you're wise enough to tell those of us in Congress that our values keep us free. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, Senator Graham. Ladies and gentlemen, obviously, Senator Graham conspired with my mother to write that because no one else could think that well of me, although I often wondered why she didn't drown me at birth, considering the gray hairs I would give her later in life. But ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to be here among all of you here this evening. And certainly, Ambassador Haley, with you, my fellow cabinet member, as we sit in that small room where if we all breathe inwardly at the same time, we'll have oxygen depletion problems. But thanks for championing our interests up in New York City, Ambassador We work daily in DOD to make certain you and Secretary Pompeo and your diplomats speak from a position of strength, and we're proud of what you do, ma'am. And I would just say, too, that tonight there is a man standing here right beside me. You and I can see him in our mind's eye, and it's Senator John McCain. And Jimmy, I will just tell you, young man, that we stand in awe of your family's commitment. I would just tell you that the serving the country in the way your family has for so many years, we cannot help but recognize your service. Your service as a young man. Ladies and gentlemen, I get all these big words about what I've done. In fact, Jimmy represents the young man who always got me out of every jam that I got them into. So, Jimmy, thank you so much. I think it would be fair to say, Jimmy, that you probably even came of age first as a Marine in that fierce Al-Anbar province back when you served there, and learned by hard experience the random nature of death on a battlefield. And then, of course, I last saw you and Holly underneath the sycamore trees as you were preparing to go to Afghanistan with the National Guard. You continued to pay your family's patriotic dues. I think over many years I've been privileged to work alongside Senator McCain, ladies and gentlemen, and I would just tell you that he's a giant in my mind of American public life. He steadfastly, nothing can diminish him, he steadfastly represents the best of our country, and I continue to benefit enormously from the advice he gives me, often in front of his committee, and most often with both barrels, I might add. But I do remain forever grateful for it, and I love him all the more for that undiminished passion for all that America is and can be. When we hear the words Senator John McCain, we think of a man whose life actually defines the very word service. And whether it's as a naval officer in the family business of basically crafting his own path in the wake left by his father and grandfather before him, embodying in fine form the irrepressible spirit of the American sailor, including all the courage, confidence, and swagger of a naval aviator. And certainly as a prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton, where that swagger infused a spirit of defiant survival in him and his brothers in arms, courage that crystallized in his refusal to accept early repatriation that kept him incarcerated under terrible, torturous conditions for many more years. I think it would have been completely acceptable and understandable when finally released after 5.5 years of torture, had he returned home and said, served long enough in service to our country, I'm going to go do something else now. But that wasn't John McCain. He was not content, I'm quoting him here, to let his time in Vietnam stand as the ultimate experience of his life. He served again, becoming a long-standing, greatly respected, even revered member of the Senate. And his influence today is so deeply felt in this capital as it is in villages and refugee camps, as we heard earlier, and places all around the world. And we need to look, I think, no further than his work as an international statesman to see that he could surmount any obstacle. And I think that even the toughest was demonstrated when he surmounted the one of returning to Vietnam several times, working to build up a strong and prosperous and independent Vietnam. And it's a nation today, ladies and gentlemen, that is now more our partner with shared interest in a free and open Indo-Pacific region, not one dominated by a single nation. So he actually can see the future and look beyond the trauma of his own life. And such grit, such vision and conviction come as no surprise to his colleagues in the world's greatest deliberative body. As a senator who carried in him the best tradition of his naval service, he again proved himself a fighter on the Senate floor, as Senator Graham has just noted. He did not sit passively by when he saw our military floundering in the midst of basically what I would call a strategic atrophy, with Congress relegated to spectator status by the Budget Control Act's mechanical and automatic cuts. Rather, he distilled a lifetime of experience into a strategic white paper which provided guideposts for our national defense strategy, the first one in 10 years, I might add. And then he fought like the Dickens alongside many of you in this room, Chairwoman, to successfully restore military funding with bipartisan support. For he recognized the necessity of strength in an imperfect world that too often fears the freedom that Americans relish and IRI promotes. Certainly I'm honored, I'm humbled even, to accept the Freedom Award from the International Republican Institute, an organization that Senator McCain esteems so highly that for a quarter century he has served on your board. I think it speaks volumes about IRA that you could count him among your number, a man whose name alone provides a better description of a patriot than all the words in a dictionary's definition. Because everything I love about America is resident in this man who denied cynicism and victimhood to be a role model for so many of us. I think I might be able to say it best like this: what you represent and what I learned is you all paid my tuition for over 4 decades of service. I had many privileged glimpses into the human condition, but I never once saw human beings flee the freedom of speech. I never saw families on the run from the free practice of religion in the public square. And as a young Marine, I never picked anybody out of a raft on the ocean desperate to escape a free press. By nurturing democracies abroad, by sharing best practices in responsive, inclusive, and just governance, the IRI prepares the soil for that flourishing. In this work, this institute does not seek to force our values any more than Lafayette, Kosciuszko, or von Steuben sought to impose their values on 13 colonies just starting out on their experiment in self-governance. Rather, they joined hands with like-minded revolutionaries and defended freedom's values. And still today, we do not seek to impose our values, but we remain unapologetic in our defense of them. This was all brought home to me in 2004, Jimmy, in a province you know well, Al Anbar. I had around me some troops who taught me a lot, but I learned out there America has 2 fundamental powers. One is the power of intimidation, and Jimmy, you and I were part of that when needed, and one is the power of inspiration. And it was brought home to me when I was on a, excuse me, Senator, I've been testifying in front of the Senate lately, you understand. It's worse than waterboarding, but we won't go into that right now. But we were out in the western province, we were traveling at night, we'd had problems, and we finally pulled into a perimeter where a second lieutenant and 40 sailors and Marines were out in the middle of nowhere in the western Euphrates River Valley, a very hostile place. Of the 29 sailors and Marines around me during that 4-month period, 17 would be killed or wounded. As we got in there, the sun came up and we felt quite safe, and the lieutenant came over and said, "We caught a guy laying an IED on the road that you were traveling in on last night." I said, "Really?" That gets kind of personal. And he said, "He educated overseas, he speaks perfect English, you want to talk to him?" I said, "Sure." So they brought him over to me, and obviously it hadn't been a good night for him. He had his shovel, his wheelbarrow, a couple artillery rounds, car battery, out there digging a hole. He looks up and there's 5 guys with automatic rifles standing around him. He thinks, well, my 401k is in trouble at that point, you know? So had him cut his little plastic handcuffs off and sit him down. I said, "What are you doing this for? We're the Marines, you're the Sunnis, we're the only friends you got here. What's going on?" And he said, "Oh, you Jews, you Americans, you're here to steal the oil and all this stuff." I said, "Hey, forget it. You know, you're obviously an educated man. If you want to talk like that, I don't have time to waste on you." And he sat there for a minute and clearly wanted to continue the conversation. And so he asked for a cigarette, and instead of giving him my anti-cancer lecture, I gave him a cigarette, and he's shaking like a leaf, so I had to light it for him. And we're sitting there, and I asked him about his family. He had 2 daughters. They lived about 40 miles away and everything, and got him a cup of coffee, shaking very badly. And he started talking with me, and I said, what are you really doing this for? He said, I don't like foreign soldiers here. Well, I could understand that. I wouldn't want them in my town either. But then he said something really interesting. He said, "Do you think, General, if I'm a model prisoner?" He said, I guess I'm going to Abu Ghraib. And I said, "Oh yeah, you're going to be wearing an orange jumpsuit for a long time for this little stunt." He said, "Well, if I'm a model prisoner, do you think someday I could immigrate to America?" Now you think about that, ladies and gentlemen, all the way around the world into the western Euphrates River Valley, the inspiration of America. Yes, Jimmy, we were part of the intimidation, but the inspiration of America reached all the way over and touch him, and he could just yearn to be where you're sitting here tonight. That's quite a statement about what this country stands for, about why what this institute does is so very, very important. So let me just close, having been given an education thanks to you there and by my young Marines and sailors who taught me so much, but close with a few words about the men and women who are tasked with that defense that we defend here tonight of freedom. And these are the tireless sentinels of your U.S. military. I think about an hour's drive it would be northwest of here, lies the Antietam Battlefield Cemetery, and there's a statue in the middle of all those gravestones of a Union soldier, private, up on a pillar overlooking his comrades, and on that pillar is inscribed these words, "Not for themselves, but for their country." And I think these words capture today the spirit of our young, high-quality volunteers, the ones who look past the hot political rhetoric of today, and they voluntarily sign a blank check payable to the American people with their lives. And for this experiment in democracy to long endure, it's going to require a raw human spirit, like what people who say they seek out danger far from the well-lit avenues of life, those who live not for themselves, as it said on the pillar, but for their country. So I'd say in a word, it's going to require people cut from the same cloth as Midshipman John McCain, who as a student at the Naval Academy discovered that a shared purpose does not claim your identity. On the contrary, it enlarges your sense of yourself. And the men and women of our military know this, having been drawn from every corner of our land, and by their example, they live out the words on every coin in our pocket, e pluribus unum, out of many one team on the battlefield. Also, for our experiment to long endure, it's going to require people with vast reserves of inner strength, like Lieutenant Commander John McCain in the POW camp, who came to know, and I quote again from John McCain, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances." And the men and women of your military, ladies and gentlemen, they know this also. They take responsibility for their reactions to adversity. They do not celebrate victimhood. They find no false security in cynicism or pessimism, for they know these are just various forms of cowardice. Lastly, for our experiment to endure, for us to hand intact the freedoms we enjoy today to the next generation, it will require people of action and passion, to quote a Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., people like Senator John McCain, a man so characterized by action and passion that he could confidently say this of his long career in public service, quote, "I don't have a complaint, not one. It's been quite a ride. I've known great passions, seen amazing wonders. I fought in a war and helped make a peace. I made a small place for myself in the story of America and the history of my times." Well, ladies and gentlemen, may we all be so fortunate. Thank you very much for this honor this evening.